There's a pattern called Hare and Copper. That is not what this is. I'm taking a kind of a variation on it, and we'll just call it the Hare and Gold instead. Kind of like a hare's ear to an extent, but it's going to be a soft hackle fly. It's on a jig hook with it's got a gold bead. That's why I'm calling it the golden hare rather than the copper and hare. And we'll be using gold wire as well for the ribbing on the fly. So I'm just getting some 14-aught brown tan thread started on this size 16 jig hook with a gold bead in place, and we're kind of at that point where we're ready for business. So I'm going to start out with one of the feathers from that partridge skin, and we're going to use some fibers from this to tie in a tail. So I've got these fibers kind of lined up, kind of like a hare's ear. I'm going to try to make this tail a little bit short. I'm just going to pinch that material, kind of eyeballed it. I didn't hold it up for measurement or anything. I'll take a couple of thread wraps that then gives me the liberty of making any adjustments that I want to make to the length of that tail. I can shorten it here, or I can make it longer before I really crank down and lock it in place. Right about there, I am good with that, so I am going to start taking thread wraps back to where the abdomen on the fly is going to start, right at the bend of the hook. I don't want to go around the bend of the hook, because it'll just make those tail fibers point downward, which is not what I want them to do. I want them to stick out just like they are right now. And then we'll just go ahead and we'll clip off the stem that remains here. So next I'm going to go ahead and grab myself a brassie size piece of gold wire. I'm going to tie this in over on the lens side of the hook. We'll get that just kind of started here with a few thread wraps and move our thread backwards towards the tail. And once I've got a few wraps in there, I can now grab this tail end of that wire and just pull it to the length that I want it, which is right about there. We'll have a little bit of a taper on this fly, but not a tremendous amount. So again, I'm just going to take this back to where I want the abdomen to start, double check that things are looking the way that I want them to, and then I'm just going to take some thread wraps here to clean things up a little bit and to initiate anyway a little bit of that taper that I'm looking for. And I am just going to use some Hare's Ear Plus dubbing, the lightest kind of tan color that I could find to match what I wanted to do here with this pattern. So I've got my dubbing kind of spread out here. I'm going to just finger dub this onto my thread, try to make it as tight as I can, and I'll tighten it as I move along because I do want to use this to help me out with this taper. You'll notice that I've left a little bit of bare thread there. I do that sometimes because it allows me to kind of travel back to my starting point before the dubbing that's on the thread actually starts. So I want to get one good wrap there around the tail. Then we're going to just slowly kind of work our way up. And you see me reaching in with my fingers from time to time, and all I'm doing is twisting or tightening this dubbing up as I move forward. And I'm over wrapping, doing some kind of over the top wraps just so that I can create that taper that we're looking for here. So now that I've got that in place, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab a dubbing brush, and I'm going to brush out just a little bit. I don't want to brush out too much of this dubbing, but a little bit to get it a little bit buggier looking. But because this is a soft hackle fly, it's going to look buggy anyway by the time we get finished with it. So got it brushed out there. We're going to go ahead and take our gold wire we tied in earlier, and we're going to do kind of pretty open wraps with this wire. I don't want it really, really close together, so I'm going to probably just take maybe 4 wraps until I find myself behind the bead. And as soon as I'm behind the bead, I'm going to go ahead and lock that off with my thread with a couple of thread wraps. Then we'll just go ahead and use our helicopter friction to break that piece of wire off, and that wire is good for a number of additional flies. So now we're going to use another feather from that bleached partridge, and we're going to use this for soft hackle, and so that's kind of how it looks right now. I'm going to grab it just by the tip here, and I'm going to just peel the fuzzy end pieces off of the stem so we have something that's looking a little bit more like that. So what I'll usually do is I'll take a pair of hackle pliers here and just kind of clamp that very center tip piece of this partridge feather, and then I'm just going to wet my fingers a little bit, and I'm going to stroke those fibers backwards. You can kind of see what's happening with those, and you can see those portion of the feather that's aiming backwards. That's going to be our soft hackle portion, and I'm just going to clip the tiniest little bit off the tip here to create a nice tie-in point. With that, we'll go ahead and kind of position our partridge feather here, and I just want to catch that triangular tie-in point that we established there. And then I'm just going to take a few thread wraps just to make sure I get this nice and locked into place. So last of all, I'm just going to take another set of hackle pliers. I'm going to grab hold of the stem on this partridge feather here, just so we can stand it up. Again, I'm going to wet my fingers because I want to stroke, preen these fibers backwards, and we'll start taking maybe 2 or 3 wraps. Each time I come around, I'm going to go ahead and again wet my fingers and try to get as many of those fibers pointing backwards as I can. And that's probably going to be good enough. With that, I'm going to just, take my thread, and we're going to go over the top of what is remaining of the stem on our partridge feather here. Take another wrap on the other side of it. Go ahead and release my hackle plier. You can see we've got a really nice blonde looking soft hackle here. I'm just going to turn my vise a little bit so I can access this stem better and snip it off. And once I have that snipped off, I'm going to just kind of stroke all these fibers backwards. We're going to start building a tiny little bit of a collar here, and by doing that, that's going to help keep those feathers pointing in that backwards direction, which is what we're looking for with this pattern. From there, I'm going to finish off just by coming back to my dubbing again and just getting the smallest amount that we're going to kind of finish off that taper and finish off the collar. I'm going to just finger dub this on just like we did before. Exact same color that we used for the body here. Slide that on up, making sure that I've got those fibers preened backwards like I want them. Oh, actually, I undersold myself, so shame on me. I'm going to go back and throw a little bit more. Dubbing on here. Then I'm just going to reach for my whip finisher here. Give this a 3 or 4 turn whip finished. Make sure our thread is nice and tight. Turn my vise just a hair so that I can use the cutting end of my whip finisher and release my thread. Well, we've reached our destination here, so there you go. Not the copper in Hare, but the gold in Hare. Great pattern to use, especially if you're swinging a nice soft tackle like this, much like a hare's ear. A lot of fun to tie it on a jig hook. Give it a shot.